Hello, and welcome to Progressive Christianity 101. Today we're going to be talking about being okay with the questions. I'm Maggie Wolford, student pastor here at Central United Methodist Church in Endicott, New York, and I'm joined by a member of our pastor team. You want to introduce yourself?
I do. Hi, my name is 𝘾𝙀𝙉𝙄𝙏𝙃, and I am the associate pastor here at Central.
So growing up, I was told everything is, very cut and dry. It's very black or white. It's heaven or hell. Everything was on this dichotomy. And so the problem with that became, as I grew up, if I even started to wonder about a shade of gray, then, that can't be accepted. And so I began to think that if I wasn't all in with everything I was learning about God and the church and my faith, that I must be all out, because there wasn't anything in the middle. And so coming to Central and learning a bit about progressive Christianity really sort of offered me a space to acknowledge that it's okay to have questions, and here's why. So I know that you also have come to this a bit later, so why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience?
Right. So I was not raised in the church. We would go on the obligatory holidays like Christmas Eve and Easter and, Strawberry Shortcake Sunday and all of that. So I came to church late, and I was a animal science major in college. So I have a science background, and I taught high school science for 33 years. And so for me, the Bible has never been black and white. For me, it's always been kind of a muddy gray color. And I ask questions all the time. And I'm okay with asking questions. And like my kids at school, I would always tell them, it's okay to ask questions. Ask questions, because then you can dig deeper and find out the information you want. So I fully support questioning everything. Question everything.
I had come across this gentleman, his name's 𝘾𝙀𝙁𝙁𝙁, and he had said that the Bible is itself a question book. The quote he had was that in the Gospels, Jesus is asked 187 questions. He answers maybe 8 of them. He himself asks 307. Maybe faith isn't about certainty, but learning to ask and sit in the complexity of good questions. And I think that piece of sitting in the complexity is the part that at least the fundamentalist, more conservative Christian ideologies I grew up in don't like. If they find themselves in a questioning place, your default is, God's ways are not our ways. I'm not meant to understand this.
That's interesting. Because I like sitting in that unknown. I like doing the investigation. And I think because of my ability to question, I don't know everything. And that's what I would tell my kids at school, my own 2 personal kids, my grandson. I don't know, buddy, but let's find the answer. I don't know. Let's find the answer. And so when you dig and you look for those answers and you sit in that moment, I think you actually gain faith. You build a deeper faith in God. You get a better understanding of what the texts are saying to us, and that ability to mine out of it and to look for the answers that you're looking for. It's okay to question that. We had a Sunday school just recently that I was teaching, and one of the gentlemen in the Sunday school class asked, "What is truth?" And I says, Pontius Pilate said that, what is truth? And your truth is different than my truth, but the way we find those answers is going to give us more faith and more understanding of who God is. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really good to sit in that complexity, and that really good to kind of stew and think about, and it's good to sit with friends too, and stew in that complexity together.
I think a lot about you were talking about that idea of like being deep, and that when you're not asking questions, it's just like being in a relationship with another person. If I'm not asking you questions, if I'm not engaging in a dialogue, then our relationship is going to stay very shallow. It's after you have those conversations and you ask questions that things are able to grow deeper and to take root. And I really like your point about having those conversations with other friends. I know that when I just was dealing with all of this in my own heart and mind, it was really scary, because again, it's either you're all in or you're all out. But once I started talking to people about the questions that I had, I started finding people who had maybe not the same experience, but some similar experiences. And I learned that they also had questions and that they also were having trouble reconciling what they knew of God and Jesus with the way that the church, like big picture,
The big church.
big church, capital T, capital C, tends to put these things forward. And that is just not a way I've thought about it before. That the other thing about gray and about not having all the answers is that there's more to learn. There's deeper to go.
I like how you brought in the idea of building a relationship with someone. For me, God is consistently saying, trust me. Just trust me. And getting back to kind of what you said, how do you trust someone, something, deity, whoever, person, deity, or whoever, unless you ask those questions? What's your favorite color? What do you like to do on? What do you, God, what do you think about this? And, and then get with the friends. And our experiences, right, are not going to be the same. But what I learned from you is going to help me understand who I am. Mm-hmm. And what we learn from other people helps us understand. And so kind of the truth, we talked a little bit about progressive, that truth is progressing too. My truth is progressing as I become the person that I am, and all of that.
Within that as well, I know we talked about in the intro video a little bit about a rebuttal to biblical literalism. And I think that part of that rebuttal does have to be the acknowledgement that, like, if you're going to look at the Bible and say it is all good, it is, everything in it is very clear and it's very black and white, and then you start poking at that. Like, what about the two creation stories?
Right.
Or do you literally believe that a human was swallowed by a whale and then regurgitated however many days later? That kind of thing, that it comes back to, it changes the foundation. If you only think of the Bible as being, it has to be literal, then what happens when it's not? Well, then everything falls apart. But I personally think that my faith and just quite frankly my God and my Jesus are stronger than that. If I encounter someone who literally believes that the world was made in 7 days, okay, that doesn't change the gospel truth and love and radical acceptance and trying to help your neighbors and all of those things. If someone is instead saying, I think that the Bible is very clear and that it excludes certain people from participation, so the queer community, for example, then we have a problem, because you're going against what Jesus tells us, which is to love your neighbor, whoever, wherever, and however you may encounter them. That's the most important part.
That's a good point to bring out. People, to go back to the creation idea. For me, the creation story, I imagine thousands, hundreds, I don't know how many years ago, but a little boy or girl walking with a mom or dad or grandpa or grandma. I imagine a 3-year-old kid walking with grandpa saying, hey, grandpa, how'd we get so many stars in the sky? You have to come up with a story pretty quickly. And so my God did this, and look what our God can do, and isn't our God great? As a biologist, I know it did not happen in 7 days, and I'm okay with that. If you want to say 7 days, I'm okay with it. If I want to say several hundreds of thousands of millions of years, okay. And I agree with what you said. For me, the New Testament, it is kind of black and white. Jesus said, love everybody. That's the truth. There's the truth there. And Jesus opened up and showed compassion for everybody, and had grace for everybody, and had love for everybody. And so when you start picking and choosing, my Bible is not a weapon. And when we start picking and choosing the truth that hurts people, that's not the Bible.
That brings me back to, so another quote that I had found was Reverend Benjamin Kremer, who said, Christianity should sound like, my faith causes me to ask really challenging questions about myself. Not, my faith gives me all the right answers for how everyone else should live. And that, I think, is the distinction. Again, if we disagree on the creation story, that doesn't change a lot about, the gospel and Jesus. But if you are instead saying, oh, I know what the Bible says about how you should be living, who you should love, all those things, that's when it gets messy, right? And that's when, you want to still show love and grace toward that person, but you also have to...
That goes a lot with some of the book bannings that are going on today. I can tell my kid not to read this book, but I can't tell you to have your kid not read it. I can get my information from the Bible, but you can't tell me what to get out of it. And when you tell me that my Bible tells me to exclude people, that's not right. And that's the questions that I have, is where did you get that information from? Mm-hmm. And how do you understand that?
So, for all the people with questions, if you want to go deeper, and if you want to learn more, and if you want to learn how to be okay in some of that, muddy gray area, what are some resources you'd recommend?
So there's a great Bible study, group study called Living the Questions. I did that a lot of years ago, and that starts to open the doors to be able to ask the questions. I think people of certain generations need to be comfortable asking the questions, and it's okay to open that. And so that opens the doors. And anything by Marcus Borg, reading the Bible again for the first time, is an excellent... I've read that book a few times, and it's just gives you a different perspective. So anything by him is worth reading.
I know one book that was really, really helpful for me was Kate Bowler's Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. And she's another person who, grew up in this very fundamentalist perspective and has now, started moving to other things. And she has a really big emphasis as well on mental health, which I think is part of why I like that, because it is a conscious rewiring of your brain to go from thinking of everything in terms of black and white to ambiguity. And that can be really scary and hard. And so it's helpful to have found someone else who does that. One other one that I would really recommend, especially for anyone who grew up in the church, is From Good Mythical Morning with Rhett and Link. They have a podcast called Ear Biscuits, and they have a series of episodes. It's episodes 224 through 227, if anyone wants to find them, called Our Lost Years, which is where they talk about sort of this break in their resumes from becoming engineers to then starting this YouTube career. And a lot of that for them was coming to grips with questions around their faith and what did they really believe and their relationship to the divine and God. And again, for me, finding someone who had gone through that journey, and they are just so vulnerable and authentic talking about it, and then they revisit it every year and sort of talk about okay, here's where I am now. Here's how COVID has impacted things. Here's how becoming a dad has impacted things. And it's just really beautiful to get to hear other people's stories and know you're not alone with your questions.
It's good to have that, yeah.
All right. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.